Hello, lovelies. Just finished working and showering and eating Tostinos, pizza rolls, and getting ready for bed. And now I'm going to test out and do where I read you a book. I couldn't figure out what book to read you, and I wanted to try something light and simple and easy to begin with to start out. So I figured I'd do something that I know is a quick read and is gonna be not too crazy and possibly like easy for everyone to get into. So I picked a Tessa Bailey book, Secretly Yours. I'm gonna start off today by only doing a few chapters to see how people like it and see how fast it takes me. And I want to see how it works with my microphone like this. So I'm gonna do some parts like this. Problem is, hold on. I want it to be so you can hear me properly. I feel like I whisper a little bit because I'm at home. I don't want my family to judge me or when they're listening to me. Okay. Alright. I feel like I'm screaming. Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. So, I'm not going to even give you a synopsis, so you're just going into this blind and you have no idea what to expect. Stupid girl. What to expect. Sorry for my face. I don't have any acne where I sound right now. I just have a little patch right there. It's signed to Sam Tessa Bailey. I also have my book stamp saying from the library on me. A lot of pages to get to the beginning. Now, keep questions, comments, reactions to yourself. Just kidding. React with me as you go. I'll try to get as much into it as I can, but I'm also gonna react because that's what you're here for. Here's my face, but I don't like my ear sticking out like that, so like there we go. Okay. Haley Welch tipped down one corner of the car. Can you hear me? Let's see. Okay. I want you to be able to see the book, so it's like we're reading it together. Haley Welch tipped down one corner of the comics section and peered across Grapevine Way, her stomach sinking when yet another group of locals bypassed Court, her favorite sleepy little wine shop, in favor of Uncourt, the new flashy monstrosity right next door that advertised hot sauce and wine pairings in the window. The exterior of Uncourt was painted a metallic gold that caught the sun and blinded passerbyers, giving them no choice but to stumble inside or risk vision loss. That's kind of fucked. Opening a place right next door with basically the same name but just different. That's kind of evil. Can you see? From Haley's position on the bench, she could see through the front window to their state-of-the-art wine fountains and wall of stinky cheeses, the cash register lighting up like a pinball machine. Meanwhile, the peeling white wrought iron tables in the front courtyard of Court sat empty and forgotten. Haley could still see her grandmother at the far right table, a modest glass of Cabernet sitting in front of her. Everyone would stop to say hello to Rebecca as they passed. They would ask her what flowers were in season and which bulbs were best to bury in the soil a particular month. And even though she was always reading a bestseller, she would carefully lay her silk tassel bookmark in the crease and give them her undivided attention. Can I help you?
Does this seem nasty?
Yeah. Not from you, from them.
Because it doesn't look like that in that photo, right?
But also, like, why make a comment?
But it wasn't them, too. Another person made this similar comment.
Also, what does it matter even if you did? Interesting that it's from that group. They're talking about you.
Because I have a fat ass.
Okay,
You're
now
welcome,
it's
viewers.
story time. So, oh, the book's ripped.
Oh, you got that book?
What? You have this? You want this?
No, but I heard it was good.
Oh, well, if you watch my stories, I'm reading it too. So, and you're interrupting.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I just had to ask an opinion. It seemed a little nasty.
Yeah, it did. Okay, so where we left off is our main character Haley Welch, which Welch really, and we're talking about wineries, a little too on the nose. Am I right, Tessa Bailey? But that's what makes things like these cutesy. Cutesy, demure. She is at her favorite place that her grandma used to be at, and her grandma, I guess, really knew flowers and loved to read. And she's watching the place across the street that's basically got the same name, getting more business while her favorite place is dying. I can't believe this book is ripped. I secondhanded this book though, so. Okay. Well, that was rude. Okay. Hold on. I'm still. Whoa! Sorry, guys. So sorry. It's out of focus. Hello? There we go. Okay. We will catch our groove eventually at some point. I really hope you can hear me. I wonder. I don't because I can't hold it and read at the same time. So this will be a good practice run to see if you can hear me. I just can you hear me better if I do that? What if I don't know if you guys can hear me. If I do this. Okay. Talking to my shoulder. Ow, my foot is okay. The newspaper in Haley's hand sunk lower, crumpling slowly at the vivid memory, and eventually landing in her lap. On the front patio of Uncorked was a literal dance floor and a disco ball hanging from the eaves. What is this place? Like, what is happening here? It spun all day long, casting light fractions all over the sidewalk and turning people into apparent zombies who preferred wine out of a vending machine. Ugh. At night, that 10 by 10 square patch of wood was packed to the gills with tipsy tourists, their purses full of overly pungent Rochefort. Never heard of that. No one sparing a thought for Cork next door, or outraged at the mockery of their very name by the overzealous newcomers. When the shop opened a month ago, Haley almost felt sorry for the young couple from downstate. Poor dears sinking their hard-earned money into a gimmick. It would never attract the loyal Napa locals who honored tradition and routine. She'd been wrong. Uncorked was thriving. Meanwhile, Lorna, the sweet elderly owner of Corked, didn't even emerge at sunset anymore to light the candles on her outside tables. Haley looked down at the shatterproof wine glass in her purse. She'd been bringing it to the Corked for tastings every day this week in an attempt to support the failing institution, but she needed a better game plan. Continuous day drinking had started off fun, but the days were beginning to blur together, and she found her car keys in the microwave this morning. Supporting Corked with the only help of a couple friends wasn't going to keep her grandmother's favorite table from vanishing off the sidewalk, and it needed to stay there. Far too many pieces of her grandmother seemed to float away into the wind lately, but not that table. Not the place Haley had gone with Rebecca every single Sunday, every evening since high school and learned the art of gardening. It had to stay. So, alright, time to play offense. Very carefully, Haley folded up the funnies and tucked them beneath her arm. She scanned the sidewalk for any friends or clients, then walked briskly across the street towards Uncorked. They'd added two potted ficuses on either side of their door, beautifully pruned into the shape of an ice cream cone. But there would be no brownie points awarded to Uncorked crew for proper plant maintenance, not even for lush, well-loved greenery. And if Haley Welch, proprietor of Becca's Blooms and St. Helena's premier gardener, didn't warm up to someone for diligent care of a plant, that's when they really pissed her off. Besides, the plants weren't her current focus. She paused outside of Uncorked and eyed the disco ball shifting in her rubber slip-ons. Here comes trouble, said her grandmother's voice, drifting in somewhere from the great beyond. How many times had Rebecca taken a look at Haley and said those words? Hundreds? Thousands? Now, in the reflective window of Uncorked, she could see how her grandmother might make that prediction based on her facial activity. Two round spots of colors on her cheeks, a firm set to her chin. Expression? Diabolical? Let's go with driven. Miss Cross, owner of the coffee shop across the street, walked out of uncorked with a bottle of some celebrity's wine in hand and a paper bib around her neck that read "Sip Sip Hooray" on the front. She skidded to a stop and bowed her head guiltily. Upon sitting, gotta be careful with this page. Upon sitting, Haley. Oh wait. She skidded to a stop and bowed her head guiltily upon spotting Haley. "I don't know what happened," started Miss Cross, quickly tearing off the bib. "I left them add me to their text alerts just to be polite, and this morning I woke up to a message about wine glass rims dipped in chocolate, and my feet sort of just brought me here for the 3 o'clock session." "How was the wine?" Haley asked, feeling winded. "Another one bites the dust." "Robust, with a betrayal aftertaste, I'm guessing." Miss Cross winced, and had the nerve to lick some chocolate from the corner of her mouth. "Sorry, hon." She slunk past Haley and into the crosswalk, clutching her bottle of duplicity. "Have to run. I'm working the evening shift." Haley swallowed and turned back to the disco ball, the glaring light forcing her to squint. After a too short second of debate, she retrieved a piece of bark that had been used to pot the nearest ficus, and reached up, jamming it into the top of the motor of the disco ball, halting to Eyesore's next resolution. Then she bolted. Okay, maybe bolted was an exaggeration. She jogged. And she quickly realized she was not dressed for fleeing the scene of her first act of vandalism. I'm sorry, in what world was this a good idea? And she's a grown adult. And also, nobody saw her? Okay, also page 4. We're just doing wild acts. That's kind of crazy. Okay. Rubber shoes were for plodding around in soil and grass, not for potentially being chased by the 5-0. Her colorful woven cross-body purse slapped against her hip with every step, her array of mismatched necklaces bouncing up and down in solidarity with her boobs. She had a teal scrunchie in her pocket, which she planned to use later to fashion a blonde knot on top of her head while working. Should she stop and put her hair up now to make running easier? Curls were flying into her face, fast and furious. Fast and furious! Yeah, yeah, fast and furious! Okay. Her gardening shoes making an embarrassing squawk with every step. Crime clearly didn't pay. When a familiar face stepped in her path on the sidewalk, Haley almost collapsed with relief. "Without asking me any follow-up questions, can I hide in your kitchen?" "Fuck's sake, what have you done now?" asked her friend Lavina, donut artist with British transplant. She was just about to light a cigarette, a sight that wasn't all that uncommon. No, that all wasn't all that common on Grapevine Way in St. Helena, but lowered the lighter to her thigh when she saw Haley rushing towards her in a flurry of necklaces, curls, and frayed jean shorts. "Behind the standing mixer, be quick about it." I need, I'm not good at doing voices, so it's gonna be hard for you guys to know who's talking and when someone's talking, and it's not just a sentence. Some of these curls, as per usual, are bothering me. Hold on, let me. Yeah, yeah. Fast and Furious. This one curl. I don't like it curling like that. Why did it do that? It's the question mark. Okay, well, now it's just pin straight. I should have fucked with it. Whatever. I'm not even a chapter in. This is gonna take forever. Okay. So she asked Lavina, donut artist and British transplant who smoked cigarettes unlike everybody else in Grapevine Way in St. Helena, if she could hide in her kitchen, because she just vandalized this place for no reason. Thank you, Haley squeaked, catapulting herself in the air-conditioned donut shop. Fudge Judy, speed walking past a group of gaping customers and pushing through the swinging door into the kitchen. As advised, Haley took a spot behind the standing mixer and embraced the opportunity to finally pull her curls into a bun. "Hello, Jerome," she called to Lavina's husband. "Those bear claws look beautiful." Jerome tipped his head down to observe Haley over the rim of his glasses and offered a slight judgmental hum under his breath before going back to glazing donuts. "Whatever this is, don't drag my wife into it this time," he drawled. Well used to Jerome's rough, no-nonsense demeanor, Haley saluted the former detective from Los Angeles. "No dragon. Message received." Lavina blasted into the kitchen, the smell of Parliament? Never heard of those. Trailing after her. "Care to explain yourself, missus?" Oh, nothing. I just sabotaged a certain disco ball outside of a certain wine shop. Haley slumped sideways against the wall. We had another defector, Miss Cross. Lavinia looked disgusted, and Haley loved her for it. The one who owns the coffee shop? These hoes ain't loyal. She mimicked Haley's posture, only she leaned against her husband's back and said, Well, I know where I won't be buying my afternoon coffee. The one you pour half into the garbage and replace with whiskey? Jerome inserted, earning himself an elbow in the ribs. I knew you would understand, Haley said, reaching a hand towards Lavinia. Oi, of course I do, the other woman grimaced. But even I can't do any more daily wine tastings at court. Yesterday I gave away 3 dozen free donuts and told the postman I love him thanks to Bejewelous Buzz. Yes, Haley replied, the wine of the disco ball grinding to a halt in her subsequent getaway jog. I'm starting to think that daytime alcohol consumption might be affecting my behavior in a negative way. Jerome coughed, his version of a laugh. What's the excuse of your behavior before you started attending daily wine tastings? He wanted to know. He turned from the glazing station and leaned back against the metal table, his deep brown arms crossed over his barrel chest. When I was on the force, we would have called this an escalation. No, Haley whispered in horror, gripping the strap of her bag. Leave her be, Jerome, Lavinia scolded, swatting her husband on the arm. You know what our Haley has been through lately, and it is distressing to watch everyone migrate over to uncorked like a big lot of lemmings. Too much change all at once, innit, babe? Lavinia's sympathy caused a pang in Haley's chest. God, she loved her friends, even Jerome and his brutal honesty, but their kindness also made Haley feel like the sole upside-down crayon in a box of Crayolas. She was a 29-year-old woman hiding behind a standing mixer after committing disco ball sabotage and interrupting the workday of two normally functioning people. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her purse, her 3:30 appointment no doubt wanting an explanation for her tardiness. It took her a full minute to fish the buzzing device out of her packed purse. Hello? Haley? This is Veronica over on Hollis Lane. Are you still planning on landscaping my walkway this afternoon? It's past 4 o'clock now, and I have early dinner plans. 4 o'clock? How long had you been brooding across the street from Uncorked, pretending to read the same Nancy and Sluggo comic strip over and over? That's fine. Go ahead and take off. I'll be over to get started soon. But I won't be home to let you in, explained Veronica. Haley opened her mouth and closed it. Your garden is outside, right? Yes, but, well, I should be here to greet you, at least. The neighbors should witness me acknowledging your arrival so they don't think you're trespassing. And, oh, fine, maybe I wouldn't mind supervising a little. I'm very particular. There it was. Haley's personal kiss of death. A client wanting to control the flower narrative. Her grandmother had been patient with that sort of thing, listening carefully to customers' demands and gently guiding them over to her camp. Haley didn't own a pair of kids' gloves. She could produce beautiful gardens bursting with color and life, and she did. All over St. Helena, keeping the name Becca's Blooms alive in the spirit of her grandmother, who had raised her from age 14. But she didn't have a method to her madness. It was all gut feelings and mood planning. Chaotic, like the rest of her life. That's what worked for her. The madness kept her busy and distracted. When she sat down and tried to get organized, that's when the future seemed to overwhelming. Haley? Chirped Veronica into your ear. Are you coming? Veronica, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, she said, swallowing, hoping her grandmother couldn't hear her from heaven. With being late June and all, I'm afraid my schedule's bursting at the seams a little. But I have a colleague in town who I know could do a fabulous job on your garden, and he's much better at interpreting a specific vision than I am. I'm sure you've heard of Owen Stark, seen his name around town. I'm going to call him as soon as I hang up and have him give you a ring. Haley ended the call a moment later. Well, my evening is free now. Maybe I'll go knock over a convenience store. I'm sorry. She is flighty as hell, making bad decisions left and right. Just not taking this job because the girl wants to. It's her house, her garden. She should be able to do what she wants. Like, what the hell? Oh, I'm not really connected with Haley, honestly. She doesn't do much. Okay, so her evening's free. She'll go knock over a convenience store. Do steal me a pack of smokes while you're at it, babe, Lavinia requested without missing a beat, and some antacids for our Jerome. Anything for my accomplices, Jerome snorted. I'd turn you to the police in a heartbeat, he said, turning back to his bear claws, dusting them with powdered sugar. He doesn't mean that, Lavinia mouthed at Haley. Haley gave her friend a weary look. Truthfully, she didn't blame Jerome for being annoyed with her. This wasn't the first time she'd hidden behind the standing mixer. Come to think of it, had it even been a full month since the last time? At opening day at Uncork, she might have pilfered a few of the flyers being circulated around town, and by a few, she meant she'd canceled all of her appointments and snuck around taking them out of store windows. On the final leg of her request, She'd been caught by an overdressed manager in a tweed suit and little round glasses. He chased her half a block. She should stop worrying so much about things she couldn't change. If she learned anything growing up with a vagabond for a mother, it's that change was inevitable. Things and people and even traditions were often there one minute and replaced the next. But her grandmother wasn't going to be one of them. Rebecca was the ship's rudders of her life. In which direction would Haley go without her? Haley forced a smile onto her face. All right, I'll leave you to it. Thanks for harboring me. Because she knew herself too well, she crossed her fingers behind her back. I promise. It's the last time. Lavinia doubled over laughing. My God, Haley, I can see your crossed fingers in the stainless steel fridge. Oh. Face heating, she sidestepped towards the rear exit. I'll just see myself out. Wait, I forgot. I have news, Lavinia said abruptly, speed walking in Haley's direction. She slung in her arms together and pulled her into the small parking lot that ran behind the donut shop as well as the rest of the stores on Grapevine Way. As soon as the screen door of Fudge Judy slammed shut behind them, Lavinia lit another cigarette and hit Haley with the kind of eye contact that screamed, This is big news. Exactly the kind of distraction Haley needed to stall her self-reflective mood. Remember that tasting you dragged me into a few months back at Voss Vineyard? Haley's breath hitched at the name Voss. Yes? And remember you got sloshed and told me you had been in love with Julian Voss's son since you were a freshman in high school? Shh! Haley's face had to be the color of beet juice now. Keep your voice down. Everyone knows who they are in this town, Lavinia. Would you stop? It's just you and me here. Squinting one eye, she took a pull of her cigarette and blew the smoke sideways. He's back in town. Heard it straight from his mum. The parking lot seemed to shrink around Haley, the ground rising up like a wave of asphalt. What? Julian? The amount of reverence she packed into the whisper of his name would have been embarrassing if she hadn't hidden behind a woman's standing mixer twice in 1 month. Are you sure? He lives near Stanford. Yes, yes, he's a brilliant professor. A scholar with a case of the tall, dark, and broodies. Nearly your first snog, I remember everything, and yes, I'm sure. According to his mum, the hot prodigal son is living in the guest house at the vineyard for the next several months to write a historical fiction novel. A zap of electricity went through Haley, straight down to her feet. An image of Julian Voss was always on standby, and a shot to the forefront of her mind now, vivid and glorious. His black hair whipping right and left in the wind, his family vineyard like an endless maze on all sides of him, the sky burning with bright purples and oranges, his mouth descending towards hers and stopping right at the last second. He'd been so close, she could taste the alcohol in his breath. So close she could have counted the black flecks in his bourbon-brown eyes if only the sun hadn't set. She could also feel the way he'd snagged her wrist and dragged her back to the party, muttering about her being a freshman. The greatest tragedy of her life, right up until she'd lost her grandmother, was not landing that kiss from Julian Voss. Okay, that was a little dramatic. For the last 15 years, she'd been spinning alternate endings in her mind, occasionally even going so far as watching his history lectures on YouTube and responding to his rhetorical questions out loud like some kind of psychotic one-sided conversationalist. Though she would take that humiliating practice to the grave. Not to mention the wedding scrapbook she made for them in ninth grade. Well? Prompted Lavinia. Haley shook her fellow. Well, what? Lavinia waved her smoking hand around. You might bump into the old crush around St. Helena soon enough. Isn't that exciting? Yes, Haley said slowly, begging the wheels in her head to stop spinning. It is. Do you know if he's single? I think so, Haley murmured. He doesn't update his Facebook very often. When he does, it usually is with the news article about space exploration or archaeological discovery. You were literally leaching my vagina moisture. But his status is still single, last time I checked, said Haley. And when was that, if you don't mind me asking? A year, perhaps? More like a month, but no one was counting. Wouldn't it be something to get a second chance at that kiss? Lavinia poked her in the ribs. Though it'll be far from your first at this stage of your life. Hey? Oh yeah, it'll be at least her friend squinted an eye, prodding the air with a finger. 11th? 15th? 15th. You got it, Haley coughed. Minus 13. Lavinia stared at her for an extended moment, letting out a low whistle. Well, Jesus, no wonder you have so much unspent energy. She stubbed out her cigarette. Okay, forget what I said about bumping into him. You two kiss pony. Hap stance isn't going to work. We must arrange some kind of sly meeting. She thought for a second, then later on said, Ooh, maybe check the web and see if Voss Vineyard has had another event soon. He's bound to be there. Yes, I could do that, Haley continued on. Or I could just check in with Miss Voss and see if her guest house needs some new landscaping. My wax begonias would add a nice pop of red to any front yard. And who could turn down lantanas? They stay green all year. Haley. And of course there's that late June discount I'm offering. You can never do anything the easy way, can you, Lavinia aside? I'm much better at speaking to men when I'm busy doing something with my hands. Her friend raised an eyebrow. You heard yourself, right? Yes, pervert, I heard, she muttered, already lifting the phone to her ear, excitement beginning to skip around her belly when the line started to ring. Rebecca always said to look for signs. I just canceled that bi-weekly job with Veronica and Hollis Lane for a reason, so I'd be open for this one. Potentially. I might have Napa running in my blood, but wine tastings aren't my element. This is better. I'll have my flowers as a buffer. I suppose that's fair. You're just having a little look at him. Yes, and a tiny baby look, for nostalgia's sake. Lavinia was beginning to nod along with her. Fuck me, I'm actually getting a little excited about this. Hale, it's not every day a girl gets a second chance at kissing her lifelong crush. Exactly. That's why she's not going to overthink this. Act first, reflect later. Her credo worked out at least half the time. A lot of things had far worse endings, like the lottery or far worse odds, like the lottery or cracking open double-yolked egg. No matter what happened, though, she'd be laying her eyes on Julian Voss again, in the flesh, and soon. Obviously, this course of action could backfire, righteously. What if he didn't even remember her that night in the vineyard? After all, 15 years had passed, and her feelings for Julian in high school were woefully one-sided. Before the night of the almost kiss, he'd been blissfully unaware of her existence, and immediately afterwards, she'd been pulled from school by her mother for an extended road trip to Tacoma. He graduated soon after, and she'd never seen him again in real life. A blank look from the man who starred in her fantasies could be a crushing disappointment. But her impulsivity had gotten worse since the loss of Rebecca in January. The fact that she keeps calling her grandma Rebecca is weird. But I guess it's because we're not hearing it from Haley's point of view. But her impulsivity had gotten worse since the loss of Rebecca in January, and it was too tempting to throw herself into one of her unknowns now, to let the chips fall where they may without reasoning through her actions first. A little niggle beneath her collar warned her to stop and slow down, take some time to think, but she ignored it, her spine snapping straight when Corinne Voss's crisp, almost amused-sounding voice curled into her ear. Hello? Miss Voss? Hello. It's Haley Welch from Becca's Blooms. I do the landscaping around your pool and you refresh your porch every season. The slightest pause. Yes. Hello, Miss Welch. What can I do for you? Haley held the phone away so she could gulp down a breath of courage, then settled the screen once more against the side of her face. Actually, I was hoping I'd do something for you. My wax begonias are just stunning this year, and I thought some of them might look beautiful around your property. Okay, that's chapter 1. Okay. Is this thing still on? Okay. If this is working, and I hope it is, you can hopefully hear me at least decently. I don't know if I'm being too loud or too soft-spoken, but let's see. Next chapter. I'll do at least 2 chapters and see how that goes, and you guys can give me some feedback so I can know how to better do the next chapters. Okay. Julian Voss forced his fingers to move across the keyboard, even though the plot was going off the rails. He'd set aside 30 minutes to write it without stopping, therefore 30 minutes needed to be completed. His hero, Wexler, who had time traveled to the past, was now musing over how much he missed fast food and indoor plumbing out in the future. All of this would be deleted, but he had to keep writing for another 30 seconds. 29, 28. The front door of the guest house opened and closed. Julian kept his eyes glued to the cursor, though he frowned. On the screen of his desktop, Wexler now turned to his colleague and said, No one is scheduled to be here this afternoon. His timer went off. Julian slowly sat back in the leather executive chair and allowed his hands to drift away from the keyboard to rest on his thighs. Hello? He called without turning around. It's your mother. Her crisp footsteps moved from the entryway to the hall beneath the stairs, which led to the back office overlooking the yard. I knocked several times, Julian, she said, coming to a stop in the doorway behind him. Whatever you're writing must be quite engrossing. Yes. Since she didn't specifically ask what he was writing, he assumed she wasn't interested in and didn't bother elaborating. He turned the chair around and stood. Sorry for the wait. I was completing a 30-minute cycle. Corinne Voss cracked a small smile, briefly unearthing the lines around her eyes and sides of her mouth. Still sticking to your tight schedules, I see. Julian nodded once. All I have in the fridge is sparkling water, he said, gesturing for her to precede him out of the office. Deleting words was part of the writing process. He'd read extensively about drafting methods and structuring your novel, but his mother didn't need to see Wexler waxing poetic about cheeseburgers and toilets. The fact that Julian was taking a break from teaching history to write fiction was already providing her with more than enough amusement. He didn't need to add fuel to the fire. Have a glass with me? She inclined her head, her gaze ticking birthday over his shoulder to the computer screen. Yes, please, sparkling water sounds fine. They relocated. They sound very formal for mother and son. They relocated to the kitchen in silence, Julian removing two slim glasses from the cabinet and filling them up, handing one to his mother, who hadn't taken a seat. Not wanting to be impolite, Julian remained standing too. How is this place? Corinne asked, tapping her row of Sacramento green nails on the glass. They were always painted the same shade to match the Voss Vineyard logo. Comfortable? Very. Are you sure you wouldn't rather stay up in the main house? With a bemused smile, she swept the kitchen with a look. We have food there, a staff to prepare it. Without those things to worry about, you could focus more on writing. I appreciate the offer, but I'd rather have the quiet. They sipped in silence. The watch on his wrist ticked. Not audibly, but he could feel the gentle drift of the second hand as it rounded the midnight blue face. Operations are running smoothly at Voss? Of course, why wouldn't they be? Corinne set her glass on the counter with a touch too much force and folded her hands at her waist, pinning him with a look that made him oddly sentimental. It called to mind the times his sister, Natalie, got them into trouble around the vineyard as kids. They would return home to find Corinne waiting at the back door with a pinched forehead and instructions to clean themselves up for dinner immediately. By no means could his family be termed close. Okay, makes sense. They were simply related. They carried the weight of the same last name, but there were instances in the past, like showing up at the back door just before dark, covered in mud and sticks, when he could pretend they were like every other family. There is something I wanted to speak with you about, Julian, if you have a moment. Mentally, he deducted 15 minutes from his next writing sprint and added it to the final one of the day, bringing him up even right on schedule. Yes, of course. Corinne turned her head and looked out at the acres sitting between the guest house and the main one. Land filled with row after row of Voss grapes, lush green vines wrapped around wooden posts, pops of deep purple fruit warmed and nurtured by the Napa sunlight. More than half of those support posts had been there since his great-grandfather founded the vineyard and the distribution side of Voss Vineyard in the late 50s. The other half of those pillars had been replaced after the wildfire 4 years prior, also known as the last time he'd been home. As if he recalled the hellish week out loud, Corinne's attention snapped back to him. It's summer in Napa. You know what that means. No? Am I supposed to know what that means? Julian cleared his throat. Enough wine tastings to turn St. Helena into drunk Disneyland? Yes, and I know you're busy here, and I'm not trying to interrupt, but there is a festival coming up in just under 2 weeks. Wine Down Napa. It's a ridiculous name, but it draws a lot of attention from the media, not to mention a crowd. Naturally, Voss will have a significant presence there, and it would look good in the eyes of the press and the valley as a whole. If you were there, supporting the family business. She seemed fascinated by the crown molding. If you could be there from 7 to 9 in the evening, that would suffice. The request gave him pause, namely because it was a request from his mother, and Corinne didn't make those. Not unless there was a very good reason, especially with favors pertaining to the vineyard. She took great pride in managing the operation solo. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling something was off. Does the family business need some additional support? I suppose it wouldn't hurt. Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in the depths of her eyes. Nothing to be alarmed about, of course, but there is a lot of competition in the valley. A lot of new flash. In Corinne terms, that was tantamount to admitting to trouble. What degree of trouble, though, Julian didn't know. But the subject of the winery had been closed to him 4 years ago, forcefully, by his father. Still, he couldn't very well ignore the buried note of distress in his mother's tone, could he? What can I... He cleared his throat hard. What can I do? Anything to help? You can be present at the festival, she said without missing a beat, a smile returning to her face. Given no choice but to back away from the subject for now, Julian dipped his chin. Of course. If Corinne was relieved, she showed it only briefly by dropping her clasped hands and shaking them out. Wonderful. I would tell you to mark it on your calendar, but I suspect it's the first thing you'll do when I leave. Julian smiled tightly. You're not wrong. Maybe the one thing the Voss family could be counted on to know about each other was their individual quirks, their faults. Corinne hated relying on anyone but herself. Julian needed an airtight schedule. His father, though now gone, had been obsessed with cultivating the perfect grape to the point that everything else fell to the wayside. And his sister Natalie was never not scheming or planning a prank. Good thing she was off terrorizing the population of New York City 3,000 miles from Napa. Leaving his glass on the counter, Julian followed his mother to the door. I'll let you get back to it, she said briskly, turning the knob and stepping into a wash of sunshine. Oh, before I go, there may be a small commotion outside later today, but it's nothing to concern yourself with. Julian drew up a vision of a stopwatch app vanishing like mist. What do you mean by small commotion? There is no such thing. I suppose you're right, she pursed her lips. It'll just be a commotion. What sort? The gardener. She'll be dropping by to plant some begonias. Julian couldn't hide his perplexity. Why? Brown eyes very similar to his own flash. Because I hired her to do so. His laugh was short, more like a scoffing exhale. I couldn't care less about flowers. I'm the only one here to look at them. They both stopped and visibly straightened themselves. Arguing was beneath them. They were civilized. They had been taught to grin and bear their way through anger, not to give in to the urge to win. Victory meant everyone walked away half satisfied, relieved to get back to their own separate world. What time is she arriving? Did the corner of Corinne's mouth jump a little? 3 o'clock. She smiled and stepped onto the porch, setting one step two, approximately. Julian's eyes twitched. He loathed the word approximately. If he could remove one word from the dictionary, it would be approximately, followed by nearly and somewhat. If this gardener gave only ballpark arrival times, they were not going to get along. Best to stay inside and ignore her. Should be easy enough. The gardener arrived with 5 minutes to left in his riding sprint. What sounded like a truck crunched to a stop in the pebbled driveway, the rumbling engine falling silent. A squealing door slammed. 2 dogs started to bark. Sorry, make that 3 dogs. Jesus Christ. Well, if they needed something from him, they would all have to damn well wait. He wasn't even going to break concentration to look at that time. But considering he started his 30-minute writing session at 4 o'clock, he assumed it was nearing 4:30, and that made this gardener a grand total of an hour and a half late. That was so late it didn't even constitute late. It was a full-blown absence. He would be letting her know it, just as soon as his timer went off. Hello? And it called an extremely cheerful voice from the driveway, followed by a chorus of excited barking. Mr. Voss? Julian's fingers almost stopped on the keyboard being called Mr. Voss. At Stanford, he was Professor Voss, or simply Professor. Mr. Voss was his father. For the breath of a second, the motions of his finger grew stiff. He typed faster to make up for the stutter, and he kept right on going when the front door of the house opened. Hello? Is everyone decent? Something about the voice of this gardener, an apparent trespasser, tugged at his memory, but he couldn't quite land in the face that matched. Why the hell did she need to enter the home when his garden was outside? Had his mother hired this person as payback for not coming home for 4 years? If so, the torture was effective. His blood pressure rose with every creak of every footstep down the hallway. I'm here to plant your begonias. Boys, heel! If Julian wasn't mistaken, that was a pair of paws resting on his shoulder. The cold, wet muzzle of another canine snuffled at his thigh, then tried to dislodge his fingers from the keyboard. Briefly, Julian's gaze fell to his stopwatch. 3 more minutes. If he didn't finish the session, he wouldn't relax all night. But it was hard to concentrate when he could see the reflection of a yellow lab in the computer monitor. As if sensing Julian's attention, the animal rolled over onto his back on the rug, tongue lolling out. I'm so sorry to interrupt, came the bright, almost musical voice behind him. Oh, you're just going to keep going? Okay. A shadow fell over a portion of his desk. I see. This is some kind of time session. She shivered as if she just found out he was a phantom haunting the premises, rather than someone who simply valued minutes and their many uses. Perhaps she could take note. You cannot stop, she said slowly, her presence warming his right upper back, until the stopwatch runs out, or you won't earn your glass of whiskey? Wait, what? Oh, Jesus. Wexler was voicing the thoughts inside of Julian's head again, and the gardener was reading over his shoulder. Finally, the timer went off, sending the dogs into a howling competition. Julian pinned his phone's red timer button with his index finger, took a deep breath, and turned slowly in the executive chair, preparing the rebuke of the century. In the history department at Stanford, he was known for his being particular, exacting, rigorous. But when it came to censoring students, he let his grades do the talking. He didn't have time for extra lectures after hours. When a student requested a meeting, he accommodated them, of course, as long as they scheduled in advance. God help the ones who showed up unannounced. If there is some reason you decided to enter my home without permission, I would love to hear it, he finished, turning. Right there in front of Julian was the single most incredible pair of breasts he's ever seen. Oh, wow. For a very professional and particular man, that's the first thing he notices? Okay. There's simply no looking away. God help him, they were spectacular. Big, to put it bluntly. They were big. And displayed very prominently in a baby blue t-shirt through which he could make out the polka dot pattern of the gardener's bra. Okay, well, glad we know that information. Is it true? Asked the Is it true, asked the breast, that you won't let yourself have a drink at the end of the day unless you're ready for the full 30 minutes? Julian shook himself, searching desperately for the irritation he felt pre-breast, but he couldn't seem to locate it very easily, especially when he looked up and finally met the gardener's sparkling dove-gray eyes and something very unexpectedly jolted in his midsection. God, that's a smile. And a whole lot of chaos. Blonde corkscrew curls rioted down to her shoulders, but a lot of them stood on end, pointing east or west like a broken couch spring. She had 3 necklaces on and none of them matched. Golden, wooden, silver. Wooden? What kind of necklace is wooden? The pocket stuck out at the bottom of her jean shorts and, yeah, he really needs to keep his attention above her neck because her bold curves were demanding to be acknowledged. He had not been invited to do so. A lot like she hadn't been invited into the guest house. Still, she was full-figured and hiding none of said figure. There was something about the enthusiastic enjoyment of her body that made his own start to harden. Julian's realization that he was becoming aroused caused him to sit up straighter and cough into his fist, searching for a way to regain control of this inane situation. 3 dogs were now licking themselves on the rug of his office, and something about this young woman was very familiar. Very. Had they gone to school together? That was the likely explanation. Napa Valley might be large, but the inhabitants of St. Helena were a close-knit bunch. Around here, the vintners and their employees tended to remain local forever. They passed on their practices to future generations. Just this afternoon, while on his daily run, he come across Manuel, the current vineyard manager whose father emigrated from Spain when Julian was in elementary school. Manuel's son was only 12, but already he was learning the trade so he could take over for his father one day. Once wine seeped into the lifeblood of a family, it tended to stay there. Similarly, wine ran in the veins of most locals, with the exception of newly minted tech millionaires purchasing vineyards for bragging rights. There wasn't a lot of turnover in residents. Certainly, however, if he'd gone to school with his now gardener, he would remember. She was nothing if not memorable. Why was the sensation in his belly telling him he should know her well, though? This man, this man. That's all I gotta say. It would be better to proceed as if this was their first meeting, just in case his perception was off, right? Weren't men always trying to pick up women by claiming to know them from somewhere? Or is that just his colleague Garth? Julian stood and extended his hand. I'm Julian Voss. Nice to meet you. The light in her eyes dimmed distinctively, and he suspected in that moment that he already had fucked up their acquaintance. His stomach soured at the way she blinked rapidly and renewed her smile as if putting on a brave face. Before he could claw his way back and ask why she struck him as so familiar, she spoke. I'm Haley, here to plant your begonias. Right. She was short, several inches shorter than him, with a sunburned nose that he couldn't seem to stop staring at. More appropriate than her incredible breast, he supposed. Stick with the nose. Did you need something from me? Yes, I do. Now she seemed to be shaking herself free of whatever was happening in her head. Why did he feel as if he'd disappointed her? Furthermore, why did he want to discern her thoughts so badly? This unpunctual woman and her hounds were interrupting his work, and he still had one 30-minute session before this workday ended. The water that leads to the hose outside is turned off since no one has been living here. I'll need it to water the begonias after they're planted. You know? To really welcome them home. There should be a handle in the cellar and maybe in the laundry room. He watched her hand mimic the motion of twisting a knob, noting the abundance of rings. The dirt underneath her nails was from gardening, no doubt. I have no idea. She flicked a curl out of her eye and beamed a smile up at him. I'll go have a look. Please, be my guest. A beat passed before she turned, as if expecting more from him. When he didn't deliver, she whistled at the dogs, bringing the trio of them to their feet. Come on, boys, come on. She coaxed them down to the hallway with vigorous scratches behind their ears. Without realizing right away what he was doing, Julian followed them. Everything about her movements drew the eye. They were harried and controlled all at once. She was a walking whirlwind, knocking into her dogs, apologizing to them, and turning in circles, searching for the handle of this faucet. In and out of rooms she went, muttering to herself, surrounded by her pack of animals. He couldn't look away. Before Julian knew it, he'd followed Haley into the laundry room, finding her on hands and knees, trying to wrench a circular piece of metal to the left, her dogs barking as though delivering encouragement or possible instructions. Had this house really been dead silent 5 minutes ago? I've almost got it, boys. Hold on. She groaned, strained her hips, tilting up, and the blood in his head rushed south so quickly he nearly saw double. One of the dogs turned and barked at him, as if to say, Why are you just standing there, asshole? Help her. His only excuse was being thoroughly distracted by the lightning jolt of energy she delivered to his space in a matter of moments. And yes, also by her attractiveness, an odd cross between radiant pinup girl and an unkempt earth mother. Now that's a thought. And being distracted by her appearance wasn't appropriate at all. Please get off the floor, Julian said briskly, unfastening the button on the wrist of his dress shirt and rolling up the sleeves. I'll turn it on. When she scooted back and stood, her hair was even more disarrayed than before, and she had to tug down her ridden-up jean shorts. Thanks, she breathed. Was she staring at his forearms? Of course, he said slowly, taking her spot on the floor. In the reflection of the handle, he could have sworn she was smiling at his bent-over form. Specifically his ass, but the image was probably just inverted. Unless it wasn't. Just seeing. Okay. Shaking his head over the whole odd situation, Julian gripped the handle and wrenched it to the left, turning it until it stopped. Done. Do you want to check it out? I am, she said throatily. Oh, the hose? I'm sure the water is on now. Thank you. Julian came to his feet just in time to catch Haley tornado her way out of the house, her canine admirers following her with utter devotion in their eyes, their nails clicking over his hardwood floor until they disappeared outside. Silence descended hard. Thank God. He still followed Haley. No idea why. His work was waiting. Maybe because he felt this oddly unsettled feeling like he failed a test. Or perhaps because he never answered her question. Is it true that you won't let yourself have a drink at the end of the day unless you write for the full 30 minutes? If this young woman was blunt enough to ask the stranger about his habits, there was a good chance she would have several uncomfortable follow-ups, which he didn't have the time or the inclination to answer. Yet he continued to the porch anyway, watching as she lowered the gate on her white pickup truck and started to unload pallets of red flowers. The tiny woman who barely reached his chin staggered under the weight of the first load of flowers, and Julian lurched forward without thinking, the dogs yipping at the approach. I'll carry the flowers, just tell me where you want them. I'm not sure yet. Just set them down on the lawn, where that line of shrubs begin. Lifting a pallet of flowers, Julian frowned. You're not sure where they're going? Haley smiled over her shoulder. Not yet. When will you decide where they should go? The gardener dropped to her knees, leaned forward, and smoothed her hands over the turned brown soil. The flowers more or less decide for themselves. I'll move them around in their individual containers until they look just right. Julian didn't exactly love the sound of that. He stopped a few feet away, trying and failing to notice the strands of frayed white denim lying on the back of her thighs. They will be an equal distance apart, I assume. Maybe on accident? That did it. His mother was definitely punishing him. She'd sent him this curvaceous gardener to throw off his concentration and flaunt his need for organization, detailed plans, a schedule, relative sanity. She laughed at his expression, stood and chewed her lip a moment, brushed her hands down the worn-in lap of her shorts. Was she blushing now? Back in the house, he could have sworn she was cataloging his physique. Really? Now, however, she ducked past him, almost as if too shy to look him in the eye. The mini blonde hurricane returned to the. Of course, she's blonde. Well, yeah, I should have known that from the front. The mini blonde hurricane returned to the truck for a canvas bag full of tools, then picked her way across the yard in his direction. Also, isn't it getting a little late to be gardening? It's like 4:30 when she got there. It's got to be around 5 now. I hope it's the summer, I guess. So not really, and they're in California, so never mind. So she started on her way past him. You took a break from teaching to write a book. That's so exciting. What made you decide to do that? Finally, he set down the tray of flowers. How did you know? Towel in hand, she paused. Your mother told me. Right. He didn't know what to do with his hands now. They were too dirty to put in his pockets, so he just kind of stood there looking at them. It's something I had always planned to do, write the book, though the occasion came sooner than I expected. Oh, why? Haley knelt straight down into the dirt and his stomach turned sideways. Can I not get you a towel or something? She threw him an amused glance but didn't answer, and in a way Julian supposed he was stalling. He didn't know how to answer her question. Why was he back in Napa, writing the book sooner than expected? His answer was personal and he'd spoken out loud to no one. For some reason, though, the idea of telling Haley didn't make him feel uncomfortable. After all, she was casually digging away in the dirt, instead of waiting on his answers as if it would be some monumental revelation. I changed the order of my 10-year plans slightly after, well, my colleague at Stanford, Garth, had something of a mental breakdown. She set down the towel, twisted her butt around in the dirt to face him, cross-legged. But her undivided attention didn't throw him off or make him wish she hadn't started down this path. Her knees were caked in the soil. This was as low pressure as it got. Normally, I would be teaching through the summer. I've been going year-round for some time now. I wouldn't know what the hell to do with the break. Haley's gaze flickered past him to the sprawling vineyard, and he knew what she was thinking. He could come home to his family's nationally renowned vineyard on a break. No, it wasn't quite as easy as that. that was a far different conversation. Anyway, towards the end of the spring semester, there was a commotion during one of my lectures. A student ran down the hall and interrupted my lesson on the geographical conceptions of time. They asked me for their assistance. Garth had the difficult memory had him rubbing at the back of his neck. Remembering too late that his hands were dirty, he locked himself in his office and he wouldn't come out. Oh no, poor guy, Haley murmured. Julian gave a brief nod. He had some personal issues I wasn't aware of. Instead of dealing with them head on, he'd taken on a heavy course let in. It was too much. Yes. One of the dogs approached Haley, nuzzling her face. She received the lick, absently patting the animal on the head. Is he doing better now? When Julian thought of the relaxed phone conversation he had with his colleague 3 days prior, Garth had even laughed, which had relieved Julian, while at the same time filling him with a certain envy. If only he were as resilient and quick to get on the road to recovery as his friend. He's taking so much time and needed off. And she picked up his troll again and started creating a completely new hole. As far as he could tell, she wasn't even finished with the first one. The situation with Garth made you want to take a break as well? A rock formed in his throat. We've been teaching the same length of time, he said briskly, leaving out the fact that he wasn't without his own unacknowledged personal issues, many of which had to do with their current surroundings, memories of the tendons in his throat constricting, a weight pressing down on his chest, dizziness and inability to find roots in his current surroundings. Julian determinedly shuffled aside those thoughts, returning to the matter of Garth. We had the same course load with very little leeway. Stepping back just seemed like the wise thing to do. Thankfully, I'd left some flexibility in my schedule. Your 10-year plan. That's right. He looked back at her truck, noting the bright blue and purple script reading Becca's Blooms. As a business owner, surely you have one. She rolled her lips inward and gave him a sheepish look from her positioned dirt. Would you settle for a 1 hour plan? Her hands paused. Actually, scratch that. I still haven't decided if I'm picking up dinner from the diner or Francesco's. Francesco's? On the way home. I guess I have a 10-minute plan? Or I would if I knew where these flowers were going. Boys! The dog descended on her, snuffing happily into her neck, almost like she called them over with the express purpose of derailing her train of thought. Who is Becca? Julian asked, wincing at the slobber left behind on her shoulder. Your truck says Becca's Blooms, he explained a little too loudly, trying to drown out the odd pounding of his pulse. He'd never seen anyone so casually muddled in his life, in the dirt with her flowers and dogs and no plan. Rebecca was my grandmother. Becca's Blooms was established before I was born. She taught me how to garden. She tilted her head a little, didn't meet his eyes. She's been gone since January. Just heart failure. In her sleep. A shadow moved across her features, but she brightened again quickly. Now she would have had to put your flowers in equal distance apart. I'm very sorry, he said, stopping when he realized she planted 3 big gatherings of red blooms and their accompanying greenery. It happened so quickly and organically as they spoke, he didn't even notice. Stepping back, Julian framed up the planting with the house and found she sort of anchored the empty spots in between the windows with flowers, like filling in the gaps. Did she do it unconsciously? There seemed to be a method here that he couldn't decipher. Still, the spacing was way off kilter, and already she was positioning the next one way off to the left, prompting a throbbing behind his eyes. Would you mind just putting a little closer to the others? You're right on the brink of a semicircle. If I tilt my head and squint. A lot like in their initial meeting in his office, he sensed her disappointment, even though she kept around smiling. Oh, she bobbed her blonde curls. Sure. Never mind. The words were out of his mouth before he realized he'd spoken, but she'd already put the flowers closer to their counterparts, patted the dirt around them, and turned on the hose to give them some water. And now she was gathering her things, sliding the trowel into the pocket it had been in earlier. If he recalled correctly, the dogs were circling her, sensing their immediate departure, dancing on their paws. Yes, they were leaving. Thank God. Right? Now he could get back to work. What time was it anyway? Had he actually lost track of the minutes since Haley's arrival? Julian was so startled by the rare possibility that Haley was halfway to the truck with her fan club before he realized. Bye, Julian, she called, tossing her tool bag into the open cab of the truck and prying open the creaking driver's side door, stepping back so her dogs could pile in. Good luck with the book. It was really nice to see you again. Wait, he froze. Again? She started the truck and drove right out of his driveway without answering. They met before. He knew it. Where? How? The stillness that fell in the wake of Haley's hectic presence eventually reminded Julian that he had a purpose for being in Eppa. The cursor was blinking on his screen inside. Time marched forward, and he couldn't spare any more thoughts on the pin-up Earth Mother or the fact that she was extremely pretty. She caused a disruption to his routine, and now it was over. He should be grateful. No, he was. Perhaps he'd been momentarily fascinated by someone so wildly different from him, but on a regular basis, that kind of distorted another person would drive him up the wall. No, thank you, Julian said to himself on the way back inside. Not happening. Okay, let me put a bookmark in. 2 chapters in, a little less than an hour. Let's hope that you can hear it from where I had the thing. And so far, I'm not hooked yet. I mean, obviously, Julian's got some neuroses, and Haley is all over the place. Some might say a hot mess, but opposites attract, I guess. Alright, stay tuned for next week's next 2 chapters, or maybe more. And this weekend, I will be reading. I chose to read Never Lie and making notes on it and annotating it, and then I'm going to make a video of this weekend when I finish reading it on my reactions, my thoughts, and explaining the book, and basically telling you the whole plot without you having to read it, and giving a review. So look forward to that. Bye. Love you, lovelies.